like RudyKnight. I think it's pretty neat. It's satisfying from a mystery standpoint, opens up opportunities for some character exploration, ties nicely into the themes, and it's enough of a stretch to be intriguing. For some reason, however, I see it get treated like a joke online, strung up and slathered in beef sauce and picked apart by carrion crows. This leaves me with one option: to defend the honor of the knight candidate with the most aura from counter-arguments I've seen over its lifetime. And, as a bonus, I'll share my thoughts on the one issue that I think actually puts this theory in a bind. Now, I'm not going to promise to put every single counter-argument in the grave with a perfect explanation as to why RudyKnight makes the most sense, but I will try to dispel any instant disqualifying points to keep this theory in the running. Now, let's start with point 1. How could he possibly go across town and create dark fountains when he's so feeble and weak? Well, I think a lot of people don't give Rudy the credit he deserves, especially after Chapter 5. A lot of people point to Rudy being winded after going to church with Noelle in Chapter 4. But in Chapter 5, we see him getting right back to it and putting up lights at the town hall. By the end of the chapter, he's seemingly strung up lights all across the town. Remember this point for later. Stopping right before Asgore's shop. Certainly a step up from being winded from a short walk, right? Now, all I'm saying is I'd be winded after getting in a fight with a bunch of teenagers and kidnapping a police officer. And maybe I'd be a little less winded the next day if I instead ran away and summoned an avatar of darkness to fight in my stead. Of course, however, this is ignoring two major things. The sharp-eared among you might have noticed that I didn't elaborate at all on Rudy kidnapping Undyne, and that's because I think this counter-argument is pretty quick to dismiss. How would Rudy have taken Undyne to the shelter? Let me ask you a question in response. Who could have taken Undyne to the shelter? She bench presses cars. I don't think anyone is going to be able to restrain her. Same for Asgore in Chapter 5, a very big man who was also a police officer. To me, the only explanation is that no matter who the knight is, there has to be either some weird light world magical shenanigans, or more members of the conspiracy helping to escort the kidnapping victims to the shelter. But if you think someone else can just carry these people across town faster than Chris and Susie can run, I'd like to know. Now, for the second and much more troublesome thing. During the lake scene in Chapter 5, Noelle gets a call saying Rudy fell down and leaves worried. To anyone who's played Undertale, this is a death sentence. However, for a lot of reasons, the severity of this should be put into question. I could list them all out, but instead I'll direct you to this video by Rafa, which covers this extensively. All I'll say is that at the end of the chapter, the lights Rudy was putting up are all placed around town, and if the mayor's husband was suddenly at death's door, would the festival continue as normal? I wouldn't put it past someone as cold as Carol, but until we see him next, I don't think we can make any conclusive statements on his health. This next counter-argument seems pretty convincing on the surface, but I feel like a little bit of critical thinking puts it up in the air. The idea is that Rudy would never put Noelle in danger by tempting the roaring with his rampant dark fountain creation, especially in Chapter 2 where Noelle is directly in a dark world. I agree with the sentiment. I don't think Rudy would want to put his daughter directly in harm's way. The main theory for his motive is wanting to save Des, but that still doesn't entirely explain him being so reckless, right? He wouldn't want to trade one daughter for the other. On the other hand, the knight is putting the entire world at stake. I don't think we can disqualify Rudy based on these conflicting motivations when, regardless of who it is, the knight's actions put everything at risk. Would Des be willing to destroy the world? Carol? Chris and Noelle for the future? We don't know, because we don't know what the knight wants. Therefore, I don't think this does much to cast doubt onto RudyKnight. According to Asgore's notes in Chapter 5, The Dark Fountain, made a long time ago, left behind a black shard that matched with the shard left behind in the computer lab, implying the Knight also made the Dark Fountain that presumably took deaths and led to Asgore spiraling. This is completely incompatible with RudyKnight for obvious reasons. Rafa touches on this in that video I mentioned earlier, but in short, we can't say for certain this black shard came from the Knight, or the current Knight, because of the massive time gap between the deaths incident and the current events of the game. Of course, it could also be that, since this is the time where Des went missing, that this was Des making the Dark Fountain, but then that opens the question of why it took so long for Des to reappear. I'll admit that this is the fishiest point, since there isn't a truly satisfying answer, but I wouldn't consider it damning for RudyKnight. If only we received some more information about this event, in a monologue from a character whose entire story is centered around this event, then maybe we could have some concrete facts to work with instead of these vague details. I think I've shown so far that nothing can completely rule out Rudy, and I'd go as far as to say that most don't do much to challenge the idea of him being the Knight. So what's this mysterious one thing, the singular issue that even I can't ignore as a devout RudyKnight believer? Well, he has so little presence in the story. Interacting with him is optional in chapters 1 and 2, we can't meet him in chapter 3, he has a mandatory cameo in chapter 4, and we get one phone call about him in chapter 5. Now, I'd say that puts him in line with all the other major candidates in terms of appearances, but I'd be facetious if I didn't admit he doesn't have a lot of plot relevance, at least compared to people like Des and Carol, who each have solid evidence for them in their own rights. If Rudy was the Knight and didn't get any new development in the meantime, a lot of players would be confused or unsatisfied, but it wouldn't be the first time Toby Fox introduced the main villain right at the finish line and everyone pretended that it was actually handled well. So then, what's the verdict? Still quite possible, but definitely not a flawless candidate. I never hoped to once and for all prove beyond a shadow of a doubt Rudy must be the Knight, but I hope after watching this I've convinced you that he can't be waved off so easily. When the Knight is revealed, I hope we'll all have this fear in the back of our minds until the moment they take off that helmet. I also hope you enjoyed watching this video, so please like and subscribe. This channel is mostly for me to express my thoughts on things I'm interested in, but seeing positive responses to what I make definitely helps with the motivation of getting these out. If you like this video, then any and all feedback will probably lead to me making more videos faster. With all that said and done, I'll see you in the next one.